Inspire Instructor podcast, where the learning never stops. Welcome, you wonderful people, to the Inspire Instructor Training podcast. So on today's podcast, we have Graham Carter. Graham is going to share his story with us of how he became an ADI and the troubles he had, and how maybe he can use those troubles in his training with his pupils. And then some troubles that maybe he had during his process to becoming a driving instructor. Graham's one of our members at Inspire, and I put this out on the group for anyone that wanted to come and record this podcast, and so Graham was brave enough to put his hand up. And actually, if there's anyone else out there that wants to tell their story, do get in touch, and I will be happy to have you on the podcast. And Graham in particular is enjoying our accountability posts with Inspire. It's one of the key benefits of our membership. So anyone looking for some accountability with their CPD, then get in touch and we can sign you up. But yeah, on to the show, and I hope you enjoy listening to Graham's story. So, welcome to the podcast, Graham Carter. So today we're having a slightly different type of podcast. We're not talking about our competencies today. We're going to have a driving instructor story on how they became a driving instructor and what led them to that. And we got a lot of good feedback from our previous episodes similar to this. So hopefully everyone will enjoy that. So yeah, welcome, Graham.
Thank you very much, Philip. Thank you very much. Really pleased to be here.
Good. And yeah, well done for putting yourself out there. So Graham, yeah, do you want to start at the beginning and tell us your journey?
Okay, so I joined the army at 18, predominantly to get away from my dad because he was nagging us to get a real job. But something I really want to do, joined up with my best friend. I served 23 years in the army. I started out, so I joined the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers as a recovery mechanic, and their job is to recover tanks, big, massive lorries and stuff like that have rolled over into ditches. So not just roadside stuff, all the cross-country stuff. So driving was a huge part of that because you had to be able to drive every vehicle in the British Army. So I learned to drive in a 4-ton truck, no power steering, double the clutch and rev on the way down when you're going down the box at the age of 18. Back in the days, you had to be 21 to do that, but the army had special dispensation. Passed me HGV3, absolutely hated driving. Thought it was so stressful. I'm a really anxious person. I know now because it's part of my autism, but I didn't know I was autistic then. My instructor used to put a blanket on my seat because I used to sweat so much. So when he got in, he'd take it off because I'd drive for 8 hours a day. I can now say, reflecting on it, that I was taught to pass a test. I pretty much drove test routes I was in the south, Borden, down to Portsmouth. Test area was in Portsmouth. He used to fall asleep actually on the way back because it was mainly dual carriageways on the way back. So I don't know if that was confidence in himself or just getting his head down.
Or just 8 hours.
Sorry?
8 hours would probably do that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the stress of being me, he's probably all whacked out by the time he got to Portsmouth.
Yeah.
So I find it really hard. So I passed me HGV3 when I was on summer leave. I got convicted of drink driving, which I wasn't proud of. I lost my trade because of that. Part of that was not part of it, but I wouldn't drive after I passed my test. I had no confidence, and the only time I had the confidence to get in the car was after I'd had a drink, and I got caught. So just over the limit.
Is this why you're still in the army? Are you still in the army at this point?
Yes, I'm still in training.
Still in training. So how does that work? Once with sort of kind of, because you said you needed a license to be in the job you were in.
Yeah, so went on a disciplinary, and because the job that it was, you had to have licenses. They said I couldn't do that. So there was potential choice of kick you out or retrain. They could have kept me on. I'd have been, I was banned for a year. They could have kept me on and let me go. But because, rightly so, driving was a major part of it in their thing. It's like, you're a drink driver. We don't want you behind the wheel. I guess that's the decision they made and said, you can stay, but you need to retrade into something else, which
Okay.
is what I had to do.
Just want to carry on with this the drink driving thing because it's an interesting sort of kind of thing and from a driving instructor point of view,
Yeah, absolutely.
having been through that at a young age. I'm guessing youngish because you were still training, so like 18,
Yeah,
19.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when I'm sure this comes up on your driving lessons. Do you tell your pupils the story or?
I haven't actually because I'd forgot all about it. It's only because I was coming on here. I was
Okay.
thinking, what shall I talk about? What have I done in the past? What's going to be relevant? And when I was thinking back to my career now, I thought, oh God, I started off a drink. I started off my career started with drink driving pretty much.
Yeah,
Like,
it just intrigues me because like we talk about road safety, and obviously alcohol is one of the key factors in that. And I find whenever anyone talks, and I include myself in this, it talks about
yeah,
road safety, you can be a bit preachy. Um, you can be like, this is what you should be. And I like when I was 18, 19, I wasn't little golden child perfect and stuff and driving around like doing everything perfectly.
yes,
And I just wonder whether that story would help them relate. Go, I get it. Like when you're younger, you're stupid. You do crazy stuff, but
yeah,
here are the risks. This is what I learned. This is sort of kind of thing, and because also with the risks we talk about, obviously people can die and all that sort of stuff. But um, it, I know from listening to Learn to Live, which is like a local like road charity near me, they quite often talk about one of the biggest impacts that people have, or the impact they have on the young people that come and listen to these presentations, isn't the you might die because people, human nature sort of takes you that way, like takes your brain into that won't happen to me. It's like
yeah.
it's that it won't be me. It just your brain can't comprehend that, so it just dismisses it as it won't happen to me. But the one that it does comprehend is them losing their license or losing their job or and then setback. So it's interesting that actually probably the biggest effect it had on you was that job, and potentially like you didn't get kicked out of the army, but potentially could have. And so yeah, it's an interesting sort of kind of story. I think it's if it was me, I'd use it.
I think, well, now I've mentioned it, and I can remember it. I definitely will, 100%, and certainly show the negative side of that because
Mm.
there is a negative side. There's a positive as well because I always look for the positive things, but there is a negative side. I could have probably had a better career if if I was able to stay in that. I had a much better career path. I could have gone much further in the army than I could. Had a retrade and I went into what's called dead man shoes job, where you had to wait for someone to die before you got promoted. So we used to walk around with shotguns.
Bit like being the prince.
So yeah, I'd definitely bring it in. I would definitely bring that in because I like to be open and honest, and I think it's more impactful when it's like you say, it's from somebody who's done it, who's been there and done it, and
Yeah.
that's in everything in life, isn't it? Whether it be the transformation coach or anything, you tend to listen to someone who's done it, not someone who's qualified in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I can see a 19, 18, 19-year-old that you're teaching to drive sort of relating to that, those moments of making that decision to get in the car, and which is ironically because you've had alcohol and your brain sort of goes, oh, I can drive because it gives you that confidence. It's just, yeah, it's a vicious cycle. So you said there were some positives. I'm intrigued to see to what they were.
Um, so the positives were, I then was in a trade that it was small knit. So the downside of that, as I said, was dead man shoes. So it was a lot. The progress, I couldn't make as much progress and go all the way through the ranks. With the other job, you could go all the way through the ranks and get to commission. Whereas my job, we got to staff sergeant. So it'd be like private, lance corporal, corporal, sergeants, and staff sergeant. That would be it. There's another two levels after that, and then you can go into the officer. So that was a downside. The positive, I got a really good trade. It was a small knit trade, and it was quite a nice little community. We were classed as probably the best trade I had because we actually made things and manufactured things from scratch. So a sheet metal worker, blacksmith, and a welder all rolled into one. And I
Okay.
would just fix the vehicles, but what we spent most of the time was making barbecues out of oil drums, wrought iron gatework, stuff like that on the side.
Nice.
So that was the positive. And I did lots of other things, and you could say that was my career turned that way. You've got to look at it. The positive was I didn't kill anybody. I wasn't involved in an accident. I was just over the limit. So I thought about it. That was a win, really. Of course, it was a stupid thing to do, and there was loads of risks. But the win was no one died. I didn't kill anybody. I'm still here to survive to tell the story, and I can then use that to pass on to other people. It could have been a lot worse.
Good.
So yeah,
Yeah, and I suppose that's the important thing to get across, isn't it? That and this actually what you're sort of describing there is why people's behaviors end up like this in a way. Like you've obviously learned from it, particularly in the fact that it affected you got caught. And the what can happen is people in any sort of driving behavior where you don't get caught and nothing bad happens, it then reaffirms that you can carry on doing it.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
so I think that's the important kind of message to get across is not to wait for that moment, if that makes sense. Like not to wait for the consequences. Like it's asking yourself, like, what would have to happen for me to never do this again? And then why wait? Why
Yeah,
wait for that thing to happen? Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, no. If I was you, I'd be using that story. Now you've remembered it. Which is so you went through in the army. Talk to me about from that point was on then towards becoming a ADI.
Okay, so I left the army in 2012.
Yeah.
Um, really struggled with adapting to civilian life due to what I now know as autism. Um, really high, I was really high anxiety person.
Hmm.
Don't like change, like routine. So being in the army really suited my autism because you got told everything, where to be, what to wear, what to bring, what you're going to do. Um, you knew what the rank structure is, so I didn't have to have the social communication and the social hierarchies, which I didn't understand. So when I come to civilian life, I was really worried about everything. I got a job. My friend offered me a job who was ex-military, and it meant traveling an hour and a half there and back every day. And I did that to avoid an interview and not have to get into that situation. That lasted a year, flogging wind turbines. Then I got into the Royal Mail as a postman, um, became a manager, spent 8 years there. And I found in between that, so I had all the alcohol issues. I was alcohol dependent. I've drank every day since 2007 up until about 2 years ago, barring the odd occasion when I was on duty and I couldn't. I'd even drink when I'm ill, even one or two. I wasn't a get up in the morning and drink vodka straight away. It's like a functioning alcoholic. I could work during the day, but as soon as I finish work, first thing I do is buy some alcohol on the way home. Um, so I got all the way up to I had that. I had some suicidal episodes because of that. Um, Found I couldn't. I knew something different, and then being married, it was constantly pointed out to me like, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? And then I used to think, why can't I do it? I know I can't do it, and I haven't got these things. Why can't I make my wife happy? Why haven't I got a great relationship with my son? And alcohol was just self-soothing. That was all I could do, and that makes it worse. Takes you into an even darker place. Um, and at some point, you know, I needed help, and it got to the point where I thought my wife was going to leave. It was all going to fall apart. Um, that I reached out and got some help from somebody else who had been in a similar situation. I call him a transformation coach. He calls himself a person who gets married men with businesses get the shit together, um, or be better, for another word. And it seemed to resonate. So I went and joined his program, and that helped me give up alcohol and a lot of other things. Got me off antidepressants, got me to start looking at life completely different, positively. Done all sorts, meditation on a daily, journal every day, twice a day. Um, Done Wim Hof ice stuff. Um, got back into physical training. I used to be a physical training instructor in the army, so I was really fit. I was also para trained, so same as the paras. Um, Once I left the army, I did nothing for 10 years. So it got me back into that. Mental health's built on physical health. Um, so it got me just going in the right direction. And it made me realize that the job I was in it just wasn't serving any purpose and not bringing any joy to life. It was just a wage at the end of the day. And lying awake at night, anxious and worried about how the next day was going to pan out and what conversations going to be having with members of staff. Um, I realized then, I didn't at the time, I realized through all of this that life could be so much better. So I thought about what was the best things I did in the army. What is my purpose? What am I good at? What do I enjoy? And there's two things that stuck out. I loved it when I was with the paras because it was a brilliant social life. It was mega fitness. It was quite alpha and a lot of bravado, but everybody's skills was much higher because everyone's trying to outdo each other. And the most enjoyable job I did was being a physical training instructor and teaching people about fitness. And then I did some personal training as well. So I looked for something in the coaching realm. Um, that then coincided with my son learning to drive through our friend who was a driving instructor who was up in Loughborough. Um, so he went up there for 3 days, did a semi-intense course. She brought him back down. She had a chat and she said he can drive independently. You just need to sit in with him. He should be able to drive to school and back. He knows what he needs to practice. If you just go in, try not to change anything. Don't give him any bad habits, which I'm sure resonates with everybody out there. That was our big thing. Don't teach him any bad habits. So I helped doing that. Um, and then she said, you've done a really good job. You should try doing it because she knows who I am. Um, she said you should give it a go because we were talking about leaving and finding a new job and coaching. And she told me about um, what had happened with COVID and the backlog of students and all of that. And that attracted me because I thought about being a PT because that would combine everything I love. Um, but I didn't want to start a business from scratch when I had a mortgage, a wife, and a kid, and didn't have the wiggle room to be able to start something straight from scratch. So it was almost like a ready-made business, knowing that there was demand already out there. Um, so I looked into it. Got funding from the army. So when you leave, if you've done 22 years, you get 3 grants of 2,500. You pay 500, they pay 2,000. I had one left and it lasts up to 10 years. So I had a look online, seeing if I could do it use that money. So it didn't cost me anything. Cost me 400 quid. And I had a choice, LDC and two smaller companies. Can't remember they are, Smart Drive and Go and Pass. So I looked at them all. LDC seemed it had best terms and conditions come in terms of the franchise. You're only tied in for 3 months. So I've done a bit of research, and a lot of them say a year, 2 years, whatever it is. So I went with them. It was a tricky old journey because it was sort of advertised, as most people were, that you could do an intense course. And in the army, that's all we do, intense courses. So that money we get for courses. So I did 2 other courses before I left: bathroom installation and electrical installer. And what training providers do is they make a course 4 weeks long specifically for the army to work towards. So I was expecting that sort of thing, and it was saying about 6 weeks residential. And then when I inquired, it wasn't residential, and I didn't really know about the whole test situation for the ADIs. and it turned out what I thought might be a quick 6 weeks, 3 month course turned into, as you all probably know, probably 18 months all told.
Yeah, and to be honest,
Um,
we're lucky to get that nowadays.
oh
So
yeah, I know.
yeah, that's getting worse. So I just want to kind of rewind a little bit because there was a lot in in there.
Yeah, sorry, I did
Um,
like, sort of go off it a bit.
Absolutely, no, that's fine. I wanted to kind of just like let you run with it. So it sounds like you obviously got into quite a dark place, and you were struggling. Was there any, and you then went and found a what you call a transformation coach, and I can't remember the exact words you used, but I loved your explanation of what what your coach described. It sounds like it's a no nonsense sort of kind of talking person, and I wonder if there's an element of, because like my guess is you could go to many different types of people who offer that
Yes,
sort of support, and I suppose a little bit like finding a trainer or finding an instructor.
that's the first
It's
thing to say.
about finding the right one for you. In that,
Yes.
was it? Did it happen to be the first person you came across? And
No,
also, what triggered that moment of I need to go? Was it like a one-off moment, or had you been considering it for a while, and just decided one day?
um, so no, it wasn't immediate. So I probably spent years. I imagine there's loads of people out there who are not alcoholics but have the same feeling Monday morning. I need to stop drinking or I need to cut down. And I had that feeling for years, and I tried. Um, Probably didn't get past 2 days if I'm lucky, um, and just kept thinking, "Oh, I'll start again on Monday. I'll start again on Monday." So I must have been googling it and looking into it. Part of the autism is I do a lot of procrastination. So I spent ages researching anything before I make the leap. Um, and I guess it popped up. I guess an algorithm worked from what I was looking at, just seeing lots of different things. And then this guy came up, Paul Mort, and I can't remember if James Smith came up first. He's a PT who trained under Paul Mort. Some people in the um, health and fitness industry will know who I'm talking about. I don't know if there's any people out there
I know who you
who,
mean.
uh,
I know who you mean.
yeah, and so there's three people: Chris Williamson, the podcaster, who's doing really well at the minute. Him, James Smith, and Paul Mort, who's my coach. Paul Mort popped up, and just like you said, it's finding the right fit. He resonated. He's from the northeast, from South a place called South Shields. I'm from Washington, which is banging between Sunderland and Newcastle, and South Shields is pretty much on par, but it's on the coast. Um, and no nonsense. He wasn't well spoken. His original course that before I started was called Unstoppable Bastards, and I liked his preach. His preach was, um, he can guarantee results, but you've got to do the work, and I'll call you out. I'll call you on it. And if you don't do what you say you do, I'll kick you out of the course. You won't get your money back. So there was that, along with the language he used, and he's really down to earth northeast, and I just sort of resonated with that. So I took a punt on that, and I've never looked back since. And I can see how that resonates in finding a driving instructor or a training provider.
Mm.
Um, you gotta you want someone who speaks your sort of language, who you think's going to get you to where you want to be, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. I'm just intrigued by this idea that I'm what I'm thinking is anyone listening who's maybe going through struggles or just like you say gradually, and I think actually it's interesting that you sort of kind of came into this industry where it can be quite a lonely job at times. It seems like you've integrated yourself into the community like Facebook wise, which is great. And but day to day you're out in the car on your own, and and I can see how that can affect a lot of driving instructors out there. And what would your advice be to anyone who is feeling like that and having those sort of kind of darker thoughts or anything, yeah, anything like that?
Great question. Talk to somebody. So what you just said resonated because this morning I was with a colleague who was my trainer actually, and we became friends afterwards. I could see he was struggling, So I offered to go for a walk. It was like a bit of exercise, stroke walk. And today, it's probably been 6 months. It took me that time to realize how much talking to somebody else really, really helps. So it made me think of the ADI walk back. I was thinking of volunteering for that, which I probably will, because just the day-to-day stuff of when, talking about your wins, talking about your tough pupils. So just on that level, it helps. When you're feeling in that dark place, you reach out for help. There's loads of people out there who want to help and will do it for free to start with. I mean, um, I I keep coming back to autism. It's not like a label. It's a superpower in my eyes. It is who I am. I don't hide behind it. It's not the reason for anything. It's there. Um, I don't need a lot of people. And like what I've just explained now is I realize the benefit of speaking to people and just airing it to someone else. Because what happens is a lot of people have the same things going on. And in the group I'm with, Paul Moore, the group has got a lot of very successful people in there, millionaires, people turn over 400 quid quarter or 10 grand a month, 20 grand a month. And when we sit there, they all have exactly the same problems than anybody else, whether it be with your missus, alcohol, sugar, whatever it is. And just talking about it with somebody else um, just helps. And then it'll lead, each tiny step will get you somewhere else. The other thing I would probably say is it's only failure when you stop trying. So it took me probably maybe 4 or 5 years to actually step out and get some help. So I did get a diagnosis. I'd been to CBT and the psychological community nurse. I was pushed by my wife to get help, and they did help, but it sort of petered off. But to actually get my own help, it probably took me 5 years of trying to stop and just looking it up online. The answer's not in a book, although it can help. I think people getting around people helps. Um, I'm currently on a streak of 150 days without alcohol, but it took me 3 years to get to that of stopping and starting. And every time you fall flat on your face and you call, you've fallen off the wagon or you've had a drink, then that's not the end. Don't beat yourself up about it. Don't say, oh, there's no point. Just get back up, start all over again the next day. Like I say, there's no failure unless you stop trying. And I'm sure you can resonate to working with your students even when they get something wrong. You know how to coach them into the positive sides. Don't let it, don't let it be the be all and end all. Don't let it ruin your day. We can coach people. We just find it really difficult to coach ourselves. So sometimes you need someone else to do it 100%. You can have all the answers, and we do have all the answers, don't we? We know we shouldn't eat that. We know we shouldn't drink that amount of alcohol. We know we shouldn't speed, but we all do it.
Yeah.
You need somebody else to tell you to do it, tell you to remind you not to do it.
Well, I think also there's an element of accountability there, isn't there? And I'm guessing
That's
you probably found that within your group and that having a coach. Congratulations on 150 days.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
I'd like to say the and you mentioned ADI walk back there, just bringing it sort of back to the community, and I think that's it's good. I really hope that ADI walk back becomes huge because I went and did the first one with put it out in our instructors, and it was tough because it was a rainy day and
Oh, the picture.
it was chucking it down, and I think it was one of those things where I wasn't expecting many people, but to be honest, I put it out there with the idea that if no one turns up, I'll go for a walk because I need
Exactly.
it's a bit of outside time. So I was on a win-win whether someone turned up or not, and we had three other driving instructors turned up. And we've done, I know these driving instructors. We've done coffee mornings. Two of them are on a committee that I'm on, so I know them. But there was just something about going for a walk and having a chat without anything going on, and we just sort of kind of chatted, and it was nice. And that's what you were saying about just having sort of people to be around is really good. And I get you, everyone maybe have their social circles outside of the industry, but these are people who know what you're going through within the industry and the troubles that you might be having with business or learners or getting tests or whatever. So they can maybe support in a particular way, but absolutely. And I think if there's anyone out there who's thinking, what one, go to Chris Benstead and ask him about ADI Walkback. But if you're thinking there isn't one in my area, which is quite likely because it's only just started and there's not been loads set up, then
Yeah.
set one up. Like be that person, I think is the key. And it is literally all you have to do is put a message out in your local Facebook group or your local WhatsApp group saying, hey guys, I want to do this. This is the day. It's really easy to organize. You just say, this is the day. I'm going to pick a place, pick a time. I'd love for you to join me. And I think you'll be surprised who's interested and will come along. But the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to go for a walk instead of sitting in the car for 2 hours. And actually that can't be bad for you. So
Really good. We know it's good for us, getting out in nature, sunlight, all of that will help change your mood.
yeah.
And quite right, um, be the person who goes out and does it because you can't, like you say, you can't lose. You've got to walk under your belt, which you wouldn't have done, and it's almost self accountability. Is you can use it as leverage for you to go out for a walk. So if you're the one who's organising it, you've got to go and do it, haven't you?
Yeah, got to be there. Yeah, I think the other thing I would also recommend about it, just if anyone is listening who's sort of kind of, I don't know, listening to your story maybe has made someone aware of issues that they're having. I think I would maybe signpost them towards Emma Cottington, who was actually going to be on the next episode. But I recently heard her talking to Terry Cook on the Instructor podcast, and Emma will be there to help you. And if she can't, she'll know who to point you towards is the key. So I think if there is any, and she's just great. So I think if there's anybody who is struggling, I think that Emma Cottington would be my first phone call if I was struggling.
Yeah, great shout. Great
Yeah.
shout.
So you've mentioned autism quite a few times. So I just wanted to ask a little bit about this. So my first question is, what made you get the diagnosis? What were the clues? What were the sort of kind of like, because later in life is,
Yeah, great question because only know autistic people tend to know the answer. It's all similar. My son was diagnosed autistic, so
right?
when my spotted at school, he got he was dyslexic. He was definitely a little bit different. We could see he was a little bit different. Um, so we went through the normal school of Action Plus and all these different levels of support, and then we got him diagnosed. And then as I learned about it to try and support him, you start recognizing those symptoms in yourself,
Yeah,
which I did. And then probably about after 2 or 3 years, I then did a bit of research, got a book which tells you all of the parameters of what they are. And I looked at there's five. When I got diagnosed, there was 5 areas, and you had, let's say you had to, you show all the symptoms in all of the areas, then the chances are you're autistic. Most people have got symptoms in some of the areas, but I was a classic example of in all of them. So then I went for the diagnosis and got a diagnosis, and that was like almost a huge relief. That it was almost an answer to a lot of what happened in the past, my behaviors, why I felt I couldn't do things. Um, so it gave me knowledge and information that I could then act on, you know, um, all for the positive, if that makes sense. There's plenty of people out there, I'm sure you know, who will use an ism, as we call it, to get benefits. And some people get stuck behind the label, as it were. It can be easy to fall behind the label. You know, I'm relatively lucky. I'm not the Rain Man, that end of the spectrum, not right down the far end where I'm mute or none. I don't want to speak. It's things are that bad. Um, I'm high functioning, um, which means I can blend in. That's what I got good at, blending in and masking, put mask on, and learning from other people, listen to what they say and then I repeat what they say to sound like I know what's going on. So the diagnosis helped me understand that. So I got a little bit of support. There's not a lot out there for adults. It's hard to get diagnosed. It takes about a year and a half wait, but I think it's about 2.5 by now. But I would recommend it if you think you've got them traits, um, and find out what they are. I think even non-autistic people, if you can find out your strengths and your weaknesses, what your biases are, what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with, then you can understand how you behave. And then if you want to improve them, you can go and try and find out more information of what you can do. A lot of the stuff I got from autism was, especially from a child, was yeah, school's a hard environment, but once you're out of the school, you can just avoid the things that you're not good at, which is an answer for some things, but it leaves you with a limited life. So I've gone more for I'm more challenging myself to do things to improve my weaker areas, which is coming on a podcast like this and talking about myself. I wouldn't have done that 2 years ago. I wouldn't even contemplated it. Um, Speaking to people in a shop, I would never do that. I wouldn't go in a shop if there was no one else in there because I didn't want the service assistants to come around and say hello to me or speak like that. That's how uncomfortable I was in them sort of situations. But now I know I understand what that is, that anxiety, um, and I've worked on improving it. And I think the diagnosis has been a massive part of it, really. And I embrace it. Um, I like to be different. I like to be unique. Um, and it helps with the driving as well because people are autistic. People have autistic traits, and I can, I can use my experiences and understand where they're coming from. So, like everybody's got their own skills, and everyone's got their own experiences, and you sometimes you can see it in one of your students or one of your friends, and you can relate, can't you? And you sort of bias your teaching to that sort of person. You get a much better rapport because you have a much better understanding. So hopefully, I do tend to see you attract people like yourself, don't they, in business or your friends, and I am starting to get high anxiety, autistic, ADHD people coming through my doors, and that's great. That's great because I think the level of awareness for all the autistic spectrum and all of that is much greater than it was in my day. Um, and it's much more accepted, and everyone, client-centered learning is the classic of accepting everybody. Everybody can learn and learn how to drive, learn anything if you can put it across in the way that they need it to be taught to them,
Yeah,
meeting their needs, and not that like in my day everything was instruction, wasn't it? You just got told everything was all input in, and if you didn't get it, then you had special lessons over there, which was segregation and made you feel uncomfortable.
yeah. It's interesting. You're answering all my questions before I get to ask them, which is
Sorry.
great. So I was going to ask you. So is there? Obviously, you mentioned about the benefit of being able to relate to people, and I was going to ask you if you were maybe taking on pupils with autism because of that relation, like being able to
Not
relate.
specifically, so I don't advertise it. Because I'm
Uh,
cagey, but I'm going to get all the problem children coming in. All that really, really hard. It's like
hmm.
I want a smattering of everything. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
mind a challenge. I don't want to be 24/7.
No, no, that's fair enough. I can understand that.
To be
Um,
honest.
but obviously you'll naturally people are coming to you anyway, just because, like you say, people are like them.
Yeah,
The are there any? Maybe we'll talk about this in because we haven't really talked about you becoming an ADI.
yeah, yeah.
Were there any challenges in becoming an ADI that
Oh,
the autism sort of kind of maybe hit a roadblock on?
massive, massive. So my autism and army background, rote learning is my default setting. So doing part one, sorry for people who struggle, but I found it a piece of piss because I just sat there and learned it. I literally 2 days I went through every so hats off to LDC. So they have like 700 and 900 questions, practice questions in their hub. and I went through every one of them till I knew them. Um, and I found that not easy to learn. I found easy to just sit down and do it and learn it parrot fashion, which is what we do in the army. Call it EDIP. Gets explained, then it gets demonstrated, then you imitate, then you just practice, practice, practice. So I found rote learning very easy. Um, on the part two, my trainer was trying to get me to think about part three and client-centered learning, and I found it really difficult when he's trying to tell me, so what's the goal for this session? And I'll be like, just do a part three, just do a part two test on me and tell me what I need to do to pass it. Where's my weak areas? What do I need to work on? Just tell me exactly what it is. But he was doing client centered learning, and I understand now he's trying to teach me that I've got to learn client centered learning because I'm going to be teaching it and more of the thought processes and stuff like that. So I found that really difficult to grasp. And then part three, I found it, yeah, quite difficult to try and get that. I wanted to be taught rote. I understand client centered, and then I would go away and teach client centered learning. But I was being taught via client centered learning with all the questioning and all of that sort of thing going on. And yeah, I struggled with it. I struggled with getting my head round what I was. Struggled. I suppose a lot of people struggle anyway with trying to tick the boxes of the competencies. I just look at each word and think, right, what is it do they want me to say? So I can just put it in a lesson,
Hmm.
as opposed to deliver a lesson that adapts, has the client's needs at the center, has good Q&A, the right time, the right place, and all that sort of thing. Yeah, it was a bit of a
Yeah.
shock for me.
Well, it's quite interesting to hear though, because we it's interesting, and this is nothing against a trainer, because I think I would potentially make the same mistake, that we tend to deliver our favorite type of learning style. Like, and I'm sure there's lots of instructors out there that deliver their favorite like type of learning style. And this should apply. So the client-centered element should, in that scenario, should have been, okay, you like to learn by rote. Let me show you how you can learn by rote. Now, don't go and teach rote,
That's exactly
but
what I thought.
yeah. And so I think and I've had this with autistic learners,
Yeah,
where my teaching style had to be completely different. It was, and it went against everything that I feel is how good learning should happen, if that makes sense. And I think
it does. It does.
that's the issue. So I wanted to have in-depth conversations and coaching conversations with these people, and these people wanted me to tell them exactly what they needed to do. They wanted I quite regularly, MSPSL is a really good example. I quite regularly talk about the fact that I don't necessarily teach MSPSL in the sense of if you asked one of my learners what MSPSL stood for, they would not have a clue. Yeah,
Yeah.
they all do MSPSL because
Yes.
it's intuitive, and it should be, and it's just how you drive. Um, yeah, with my autistic people that I can particularly remember a couple of years ago, she knew MSPSL, and because that's what she wanted. She needed that routine of, this is how I'm going to do it every single time, and then we had to go through like, what when will it be different and things like that. But and it's about changing that learning style. So it is interesting that in that scenario, that maybe your trainer should have changed their learning style for you. I could see why they didn't, because they wanted to show you different learning styles because you're going to go deliver it. But I think you could train someone in a certain learning style to do different learning styles, if that makes sense. And
Absolutely.
but are you, so on taking that forward then, for you being a driving instructor, do you find that difficult? Because if your learning style is rote, and do you find it difficult to then not do that with your learners?
Um, I tell you, what I find difficult is I can see the learning needs rote, and it's only because you've said it. So for me, that would be client-centered learning, recognizing they want rote and they want a sequence,
Hmm.
or they want something in black and white to follow. That was for me was client-centered learning, and I believed the way DVSA is seeing it and the training comes across, it's not. So I found that I could see someone wanted rote learning, and I still try to do client centered actually. And I think it's an active thing I've got to do. So if we're honest, you've got to be performing really well and have a lot of energy and time to be actively doing something that's a thought process, if that makes sense. So
Mhm.
you're actively changing from rote to client centered, where I have to think about it, think about what I'm doing, what questions I'm going to ask, as opposed to if I was just given a rote lesson, I could do it naturally, if that makes sense. It'd be like a default setting. That would be much easier. Um, so I struggle to answer the question, really, Philip.
Well, it's interesting because I would probably be the opposite way, but I see what you're saying. I would find it difficult to give a rote lesson now. Like back in the day when I was basically taught to do that,
Yeah,
it would be fine. But now I would have to consciously not coach, if that makes sense. You sort of kind of mentioned client centered a couple of times there, and I think maybe this is where client centered and coaching and some of the words get a bit mixed up. But for me, with client centered, the whole it's there in the words that you're centering the lesson around the client, and that includes learning styles. So if that client's preferred learning style is rote learning, you are doing a client centered lesson by offering them rote learning.
yeah,
um it might not be the best way for everyone. I certainly don't think rote learning is the best way for people to genuinely understand stuff and be able to apply it, but it might work for that person. And you might just tweak it a little bit with a little bit of rote learning, but then maybe getting them to explain what they've learned so that they can analyze it a little bit. But absolutely, it's about changing that style of learning for the pupil. So yeah, you could go and do rote learning on a part three if you certainly if you explain to the examiner, this is what my learner is, this is my learner's preferred learning style,
yeah,
this is why I'm doing it this way, because that is client centered. Because
yeah,
you're
yeah. I get it. I can see it now. You see it, I can see it as well. Because when I'm coach, them people, when you coach them, they just want the answer. This is what you need to do. You need to do X, Y, and Z as you go around that corner. That's where you need to look. This is when we need to put the signal on. And there's not so much understanding going on, and they get it, and then you can explain the understanding afterwards.
yeah,
Sense.
yeah,
And
definitely.
when you get the question, like
It,
trying to get the answer out of them can take. You can see it takes a long time, and it could be sometimes it can be quicker to do the rote because that's what they understand, and you can put the understanding in afterwards.
yeah, I think we've got to be careful not to fall back on something like that just because they're finding it difficult to talk through. It's a defined balance.
Balance in it, do a balance.
But finding that sort of kind of like right learning style is crucial, because otherwise it is a bit like putting a square peg in a round hole. It just it's not going to work, because the learning styles don't match. And I suppose in your situation, it's about you being able to deliver different types of learning styles. But that's the same for everyone. So I should be able to deliver different types of learning styles that aren't the one that match mine. And I think everyone does like favor their type, and then we'll, because I suppose if it's your type of learning style, you see that as the best way of learning because that's how you learn. And so when you're then in the car, it's quite easy for you to go, well, this'll work because this is the best way. Like even if it's subconscious, like it feels the best
Yeah,
way to learn, but that's the best way for you to learn. And so I think it is something for everyone to be quite conscious of, that they're not yeah, they're not forcing their learning styles on other people.
yeah, yeah. I think I'm looking in the autistic side of me is like that's not the way to. I've been told that's not the way to do it. So I really focus on client centered and coaching more than my default setting, if that makes sense. I think when you're tired, it's been a long day, you automatically drop to your lowest form of training. You drop into that rote. And that's where your reflection logs come in because if you can reflect and spot it, then you can do something about it, can't you? Well, that means a change to how you with that client, or just mean a change to how your energy flows in that day. Um, be an accountability group, like what certain training providers provide for you.
Yeah. Nice, that's a lovely little plug. So yeah, we do an accountability with Inspire. Actually, just having mentioned your because on your last couple of the our accountability, you've talked about reflective logs and also getting your steps in,
Yeah,
which I love because I agree that getting out there and being physical really helps with mental health as well. The But just going back to the reflective logs, how have you found those? How are you finding doing reflective logs on and just to clarify for everyone, these are reflective logs for you, not for your learners. Is that right?
yeah, yeah. That's right. So they are. I've got. I've actually got two. So I've got reflective logs for the lessons. So that's sort of putting it against a part three sort of standards questions. Did you see it? Did you see it? Did you suss it? Did you have a plan? Did you discuss the plan? Did you adapt? I haven't got one handy actually. I find them really helpful. And the reason I put it in the accountability group, so through my transformation group, we have accountability groups and a journal every day. And it's probably one of the biggest things ever do, that's changed in the life is doing that. Being able to reflect on whatever it is you're doing and setting some changes for the next week. So setting some sort of intention of the week, and then at the end of the week, reflecting on everything you've done based on what you've logged during that week to see what went well. It's all stuff we know. What went well, what didn't go so well, what changes would you make next week? Why didn't it go so well? Is it because you don't value it so much? Does it need some tweaking? Does it need to go higher up the list? Whatever it is. Um, so reflection across the whole board has been a massive, massive change in my whole life, personal. Reflective logs we're talking about there are really, really good. I had to put in the accountability group because I've had them a long time and I fill them in and then I don't really do anything with them. And then you sort of drop off. Anything you try and change, um, you tend to find you'll do it for a bit while you're all keen as mustard, and then it sort of peters off as you become busy, other bits in life get in the way. So that's why I put mine in the accountability group, because then I'd have to do them and then I'd have to talk about them at the end of the week. And that worked really well. And it's so like for this week, I've highlighted not too much telling, more questioning, which I told my colleague, he said, oh, I'm exactly the same. I imagine quite a lot of people are like that. And talking about risk, when I pull people over and we have the discussion, why didn't it go so wrong? I tend to think I forget about risk. I was going to post a question asking, actually, in the group, um, which is another great reason to have an accountability group because you've got peers that you can ask questions to. Um, what other ways can we talk about risk? Because my autism is when I talk about risk, I have to go, so what's the risks involved in this? That's the only understanding I have of it. But I know other people that use stuff like, well, where should your awareness be? So even just talking about mirrors is bringing attention to risk, I believe. So I've highlighted that this week. I need to look at speak about risk a bit more. Um, I'd highly, obviously I'm only a year into it. I'd highly recommend reflection logs, even if you do 50% of your lessons. Just have it and look for trends. What is it that's going really well that you know you're good at? And then look for where's the opportunities to improve on what you know you look at. And the reason I do that is because when it comes to a standards check, I don't want to be absolutely panicking, thinking, oh, I need to learn loads of new stuff again. Because I think it's easy to drift in anything in life. It's easy just to start drifting, go into a default setting mode, and with reflection, you're always putting the spotlight back on what you've done, so you can see any trends for the good or for the bad.
Yeah, I think particularly actually in this industry because if you think about most jobs, you might have a manager or supervisor or somebody that's able to not necessarily keep an eye on you, but just like give you a nudge in the right direction on
Yeah,
occasion. Or even just for someone to that you can say to your supervisor or manager saying, is this right? Am I doing this right?
yeah,
And it's difficult in this industry because you're out in the car, no one's watching you. It like you said, it is beneficial of having the group you're talking about is obviously our inspired mentorship group, and I've noticed with the accountabilities as they've started to grow over the last few weeks that people are getting quite specific about what they're going to do that week, and that's something we talk about as well, which is being really focused on like one or two things to improve,
Yeah.
because you can't do it all at once.
Um,
But I do like the fact that you know that at the end of the week we're going to come on with a Facebook Live and we're going to ask you, how did you do? And I think that keeps you honest during the week. And yeah, keeps you on your toes a little bit, I suppose. And then you're there to able to ask the questions. I will look forward to you putting that question in the group about um, about asking about risk, because it'll be good to just get everyone's answers on that as well. Um, is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up? Is there anything we haven't covered as we've gone through your story?
uh, I'm not sure. I didn't come with any plan. I just waffle on about how my life's gone. I think we've covered most parts. I mean, I think what you said, anything in life where you're making change. So, like when I went through transformation, everything's one step at a time. I did want to stop drinking. I did want to be better. I did want to be fitter. I did want to eat better. I did want to earn more money. We can't do it all at once. I think is it one of the trainers out there, I think it might be Ray, just 1% at a time, just one step at a time. And over a course of weeks, might have been you said this the other week. If you do one step at a time every week, end of the year, you'd be 52 weeks, 52 times better, 50% better. And try not to get caught in the trap of overconsumption, trying to get information from everywhere, trying to just focus in one area and then just do one thing at a time or two things at a time and just get it a little bit better. Just treat yourself like you would treat a client or your best friend if you were coaching them. That's probably one of the things I would see to people.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it was me that mentioned
Yeah.
the 52 weeks thing, but it's a really interesting concept because you you don't really notice the changes when you're doing small little percentages until you look back, and I think that's important to do sometimes. And like, I don't know you from 5 years ago
Yeah.
or 10 years ago, and but I can imagine if you look back and reflect now from compared to the person you were then to now, it's a huge jump, it's a huge change. But day to day, that's not very, it's a bit like if you haven't seen someone for a few years, they notice a big change. But if you're seeing
Yeah.
someone every day, you don't notice them change at all. And I think that's which in a way can make it hard to make those progresses, because you're not noticing the change day to day. But why maybe it's important to set goals, and why it's important to reflect. And you talked about reflecting on every single lesson. Maybe it's also important to go back and reflect every 3 months, or every year, which will naturally sort of kind of happens in January, doesn't it? Everyone sort of kind of reflects
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the year and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think it is important to remember what the previous version of you was, because that helps you realize what you're doing is working, and you are better than you were, and to carry on making those small changes, because in 5 years you'll look back at this person and be like, oh, look how much more I've progressed. And if you're making those baby steps all the time.
Yeah, massive. I mean, that is a huge part. Is we call it measure backwards skillfully. So you look back at what you've done. So we have quarterly reviews, and like I said, just doing a weekly review. Quite often, I look back at the week, go through my journal, think, oh, yeah, I had a really good lesson with that person. That was a fantastic test pass on Tuesday. Because I'm doing it on Sunday, there's so much of life in between. You forgot all about it, and where you put your where you put your focus, it grows. So if you put your focus on what your wins are and what you're good at, then that grows confidence. And we know that from our pupils. If they start focusing on stalling it around about, then they're going to start stalling it around about, because what you focus on grows. So you do it the other way and focus on all the good stuff as well, which is like you say, looking back. That is will keep you realizing how much you've gone forward, because, like you said, the gradual steps you don't see it. It becomes normal, doesn't it?
Hmm.
And you're always looking at the next goal as well.
Yeah.
The learnings in all of the journey. The goal is just somewhere to get to, because once you get the goal, the achievement lasts a day, and then you want to find something else, because it's all about the journey, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a lovely note to leave it on. So I think we'll wrap it up there. So yeah, thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I'm sure that lots of people are going to find it inspirational and helpful. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks for putting it out there, and thanks for putting the offer out there. It's been great, really good.
Inspire Instructor Podcast, where the learning never stops.